In 1977, George Lucas changed the film industry forever with releasing his smash hit Star Wars. And we know what has come from then. We've seen movie after movie, television shows, merchandising, comic books, video games, everything stemming from that one idea. But it almost never happened. In fact, I think there's one moment in particular that if it doesn't go exactly this way, Star Wars never gets off the ground as more than just a one-hit wonder. Even listen to what Irvin Kershner, the director of Empire Strikes Back, had to say about George's perspective of the franchise going forward.
I need this picture to be better than the first one, because if it gets an audience, and we don't know whether it'll have an audience, maybe only the first one was the one they liked. If this audience likes the second one, I will have a franchise. I'll be able to do more Star Wars pictures. If it doesn't do well, I'll just chuck it. Ugh. So you want me to be the fall guy, I said.
And so it's clear that if The Empire Strikes Back had failed, Star Wars was no more. And so Empire Strikes Back was being funded by George Lucas because he wanted to ensure that the film he wanted to make it better, to make it bigger, to do everything his specific way could be done. And actually, this ends up being a genius move, but he doesn't just take control of everything. He passes the directing off to Irvin Kershner and allows him to do the directing while George stays back at the ILM studios. Now, all of this contributed to what would be the greatest sequel of all time, but I think there's one moment in particular. There's one very specific scene that set Star Wars into the stratosphere, that enshrined it forever as the blockbuster hit it would be. It would spawn from this moment into the IP that we know today. And many of us, I don't think even realize that if this moment doesn't happen, it would all have gone away. I think The Empire Strikes Back as a film might even have failed without this scene. Star Wars: A New Hope ends with the rebellion destroying the Death Star. It ends in hope. It ends with this perspective that things are changing for the better. But then quickly, in The Empire Strikes Back, the rebellion is being crushed. They're driven off Hoth. It feels inevitable that the strength and the might and the size of the Empire is just too much for this fledgling rebellion. And so even though the first film ended with hope, now we are starting to doubt, we're starting to wonder what's going on. And this is really where this whole film flips everything upside down. But this is more than simple subversion of expectations. This is more than just giving the opposite of what the audience thinks, but instead, even in Kershner's own words, everything was about the character.
Because I was constantly thinking character.
And so The Empire Strikes Back is a view and a perspective not from these massive big battles between good and evil, light and dark, the Empire and the rebellion. Instead, we get to the ground level. We're seeing it through the eyes of Luke Skywalker, through the eyes of Han and Leia, and all of a sudden everything starts to become clearer. But it all builds to one very important moment that no one saw coming.
When I first saw the dialogue that said, "Luke, I am your father," I said to myself, he's lying. I wonder how they're gonna play that lie out.
As that evolved, I did the first film, I didn't know how the public would take all this and that it would be as successful as it was and Darth Vader would become the character that he became. So when I got down to the second film, I had to make a decision about whether I was really going to go through with this thing of him being his father. And finally decided that that really was the way, it was the original story and that was the one I really liked the most, and so I'd stick with it.
This can't be true. Darth Vader killed Luke's father. How could Darth Vader be Luke's father? This one twist sent people spinning.
Join me, and I will complete your training.
With our combined strength, we can end this destructive conflict and bring order to the galaxy.
I'll never join you!
If you only knew the power of the dark side. Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father.
He told me enough! He told me you killed him.
No. I am your father.
And for folks like me who were not able to see the original films in theaters, I wasn't born yet, we don't really grasp, we don't really understand how big a twist this really was. People didn't believe it to be true. People really thought that Darth Vader was being manipulative, that he was lying, that he was just trying to mess with Luke's head. And so the film ends. The film ends with this giant question. Is Vader really Luke's father? Luke is hurt. He's lost a hand. Han is captured and encased in carbonite. It feels like everything is completely lost. And that's why that scene with Vader and Luke changed everything in the Star Wars galaxy. That one twist that was so closely guarded, George made sure that it didn't get out. He didn't even let people know.
How long did you have to keep that secret? Well, the contrast was when we did Star Wars, nobody cared. You know, I read it and I gave it to my friend to read. I said that this is the goofiest thing I've ever read. And then he called and he said, you're right, it is goofy. Can I give it to Meredith? I said, sure. I passed it all around. Nobody cared. By the second film, that's when the scrutiny became more intense. Yeah. And there was a wonderful substitute revelation. In that scene, the way we filmed it, Vader said, you don't know the truth. Obi-Wan killed your father. And the idea of Alec Guinness being the real villain, I thought, wow, what a spectacular twist. And it's just as you see in the director, Irvin Kershner took me aside. He came to my dressing room, actually, and he said, I'm going to tell you something. I know it. George Lucas knows it. And when I tell you, you'll know it. But if it leaks, we'll know it was you.
I really don't think it can be overstated how important that scene is to the Star Wars saga, how important that one scene is to everything Star Wars, because I think if you take that out, I'm not going to say that the movie fails, but it is just so different a feeling. Yes, Luke might be defeated. Yes, Luke might still need a new hand, but the emotional toll that could take to wrestle with this idea that the evil one in the galaxy is actually your father. You were having this ideal of being a Jedi like your father, but now you have to kind of go through these demons and these thoughts and this wondering that this darkness that's in him is also in me. What if I turn in to my father? And I think that all of us have had those moments and thoughts where we've wondered, are we just going to be like our parents? How are we going to be different, for good or for bad? What makes us different? Or are we just little clones? And so all of this comes into the story and really makes it land. It makes it connect. Now, don't get me wrong, there's tons of other scenes in The Empire Strikes Back that are important. There's tons of other scenes that really make the movie what it is, that give us the tone and the perspective that it needs to have for that sequel to work. But none are as important as Darth Vader telling Luke that he is Luke's father. And yes, you can make the case that this was one decision among many that made this film work, and that's true. But I think if you remove this from The Empire Strikes Back, Star Wars is not happening. I don't think Empire becomes the best film in the Star Wars saga. I don't think we praise it and universally love it the way that we currently do, because it sent the fandom down a path of wondering. It set up so many things. It made us want to see the backstory of Anakin Skywalker. It made us want to see that story between Obi-Wan and Anakin, and really that's been the foundation of Star Wars all the way through, is this relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin's kind of descent into the dark side and then eventual redemption in Return of the Jedi. The very fact that Vader is Luke's father makes the redemption at the end of Return of the Jedi so much more impactful. It sets everything in a perspective that is just quite simply genius. So you might not love all of the decisions that George Lucas has made throughout the years. You can make the argument that he is not always that great at writing dialogue, because even Irvin Kershner has said when he saw the script, he didn't like the script to Empire Strikes Back. And it was part of the reason why it was so difficult for him to want to direct the film. And that's partly why it's such a miracle we got Empire Strikes Back the way that we did, because Irvin Kershner didn't want to direct Star Wars. But if you want to hear about how George Lucas convinced him to be the director of the best sequel of all time and probably the best Star Wars movie of all time, click right here for that video. Thanks so much for being here. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video on the way out. Remember, the Force will be with you always.